Foundation and host of this event. Welcome to this event. Global anti-Semitism as threat to national peace and security. During the recent Gaza conflict, the streets of Paris, London, Amsterdam, and Berlin were inflamed with the Arabic phrase, "Ha'iba Yahud, Ya'is Muhammad, Sahayudu." The word refers to the Battle of Ha'iba, in which the Prophet Muhammad slaughtered and enslaved thousands of people. In short, it can't be Muhammad is coming back for you. Or put another way, death to the Jews. The crowd weren't bashful about saying death to the Jews in English, so no one could mistake what the Arabic chant actually meant. Surprisingly, the European street mob hatred of Jews and of Israel seems to outpace the Middle East streets hatred Jews in Israel. Is this a new persona? What might this new virulent anti-Semitism lead? Where might this virulent anti-Semitism lead? How can we stop it? How could this new form of anti-Semitism harm the world's peace and security? These are some of the questions which we hope to get a better understanding of today from a distinguished panel of speakers. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the permanent representative and ambassador of Palau to the United Nations. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
I would like to extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you very much for coming to this event on global anti-Semitism, a threat to international peace and security. We have a great panel who are thinking about this topic, and we'd like to make sure that there will be time for question and answers afterwards. I won't say much. Please allow me just to make 3 short points. If you want to know why Palau is doing this, the answer is that it's a matter of practicing our faith. As a Christian nation, we believe in the path of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel. On the first day of each new year, we gather as a nation to seek God's blessings for our nation, our people, as well as for all of His children throughout the world. This God has said, "I will bless those who bless Israel, and curse those who will curse Israel for generations." These days, we have so much sadness and atrocities throughout the world. Among them are those that occur in the Middle East, in Gaza and Israel. We need to stop pointing fingers and get to the truth as the first step to building peace. I found it interesting at the session this morning on responsibility to protect that all member states who spoke agreed on the responsibility of each nation to protect itself. Some even expressed regrets that states have failed to protect themselves, and yet many condemned Israel for taking steps to protect its own people. All agreed we should do all to prevent genocide, and yet we stand aside when nations call for annihilation of the state of Israel. These same nations who stand aside are quick to come to support the Pacific Island nations when we say that we will lose our states due to the rising seawater. Finally, the other day on television, there was news about 2 Jewish men who attacked 2 black men. The commentator said that this was a racist attack, and I could not help but wonder, how can Jews attack others on the basis of race or color or any other factor for that matter? This illustrates the point that we need to know the facts before reading them. So now, welcome again. Let's get started. Please welcome His Excellency, the Ambassador Permanent Representative of Israel.
anti-Semitism. And this is something that requires courage. And courage is a commodity that we need more today. In speaking out and standing up and standing for the values that we all cherish and we need to protect. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Goji, where are you? Putting this event together. And I want to ask you a question, and you should answer honestly. There's no question that you're passionate. You're persistent. You're absolutely driven, and you refuse to take no for an answer. Tell me truthfully so I know. Are you in fact Jewish? And I want to thank you, Ambassador, friend, and the permanent representative of Palau. Not only are you a good friend, but you are someone who symbolizes in everything that you do the passion and the belief that I think every good person should carry with them throughout life. I want to thank you for being able to call you a personal friend. Thank you. And I also want to thank you for your courage, for coming over here and speaking out and speaking the truth, which is always not easy, and especially speaking out for women in a world where women are looked upon as mostly separated. So thank you, and thank you all the panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, we must never lose sight of the fact that every human being is an individual, a person with feelings, ideas, and dreams. As the renowned Israeli poet Zelda Mishkovsky wrote, "Lechol ish yesh shem, shenatan lo elahim, venatnu lo aviv v'imo." Unto every person there is a name given to him by God and given to him by his parents. And yet history has shown us there are always those who believe that some lives are worth less than others because of their faith, because of their nationality, their ethnicity, or even their ancestry. From Australia to Argentina, from the United Kingdom to the United States, Jews have been attacked on streets for wearing a kippah. Their businesses have been vandalized, and riots have erupted outside their synagogues. These are not acceptable protests. They are the words and actions of bigots who seek to demonize the democracy and its people. According to reports from the World Zionist Organization, and listen to this, the numbers are absolutely staggering. There's been a 130% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in the United States, and over 400% increase in anti-Semitic events in Europe, and a 1,200% increase in South America. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share with you a story of a young mother named Anna and a 6-month-old baby. The two left their home in the center of Paris on a beautiful spring morning and walked a short distance to a nearby station. As they stood, waiting for the bus, an elderly woman walked up to Anna and yelled, "Dirty Jews! Enough with your children already." And the elderly woman began violently shaking Jew is eating our bread. Jews are stealing our food. And although the station was crowded with commuters, no one said or did anything. The attack on Shmuel took place in 1937, while the attack on Anna took place 2 months ago. 77 years may have passed, yet it seems that there is little difference for a European Jew in 1937 and 2014. There are countless Jews, all with a name, a family, and a story, who have found themselves under attack in recent weeks. Anti-Semitic rhetoric morphed with violence and led to the firebombing of the synagogue in Wuppertal, Germany, earlier this month. It reminded me of the first torching of a synagogue that took place in Nazi pogroms in 1938. Where is the outrage? Where are the universal calls of condemnation? My friend, the silence of 2014 sounds very, very similar to the silence in the 1930s. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that we all have a responsibility, each and every one around this room. We all have a responsibility to stand up and fight, and we all have a responsibility to stand up and win. We're here in the heart of the United Nations, where the countries of the world are represented. When you walk through the gates, you pass the flags of 193 member states. There are 25 flags with a cross on them, 15 with a crescent, and only one single Jewish star of David. For some people in some nations, one Jewish state is one too many. They would like to see us to see the day when Jews are once again scattered, homeless, persecuted, and defenseless. Throughout history, bigots found a pretext to hate the Jews, either because they were too rich or because they were too poor, either because they were capitalists or because they were communists, either because they kept them to themselves or because they were assimilated. There's no logic or reason for that sort of hatred. As Israeli peace activist Amos Oz pointed out, in the 1930s, anti-Semites declared Jews to Palestine. Today they shout Jews out of Palestine. They don't want us to be there, they don't want us to be here, and they don't want us to be. Ladies and gentlemen, here in the United Nations, Israel is under attack on a daily basis. The attacks may be masked as criticisms of Israeli policies or the Israeli government. But let's not be fooled. When heads of state and ambassadors in this institution compare Israel to Hitler and the Nazis, is this legitimate criticism? Of course not. It's just the newest incarnation of the world's oldest hatred. The danger today is greater than even before because Israel is on the front line of fighting against extremists, racial extremism. What is at stake today is, truthfully, the future of freedom itself. Israel is surrounded by violent and radical groups that suppress the rights and beliefs of millions of people. And yet it is shown that it can be, and still be, and maintain itself as a true and vibrant democracy. To have a free press and to have an independent judiciary each and every day under enormous pressures since the establishment of the State of Israel. It's time for the rest of the world to pick a side. Will you stand up? Will you stand with terrorist groups that shoot rockets into cities? kidnap girls from the classrooms, cut off the heads of journalists, and execute minorities? Or will you stand up with democratic nations that believe in human rights, tolerance, and freedoms? I walk the halls of the United Nations every day, tall and proud of who I represent and what I represent. We ask you all to stand tall beside us because it is the right thing to do, because there really isn't any other choice. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Brigitte Gabriel, CEO and President of Africa America. Brigitte, I'm absolutely delighted to have you here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I am honored to be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege to be here today speaking in defense of Jews worldwide and the evils of anti-Semitism. As you notice, I am wearing a Star of David. This necklace was given to me by a man during a book signing in Dallas, Texas. This necklace belonged to his wife, who died in a tragic accident. He said to me crying, "This necklace was my wife's favorite. She died wearing it. She considered you her hero for your work for the Jewish people. I want you to have it. Promise me you'll wear it." I couldn't find a more befitting time to honor her and her memory than now, wearing this Star of David as a Lebanese, giving a keynote speech at the United Nations in defense of the Jewish people. We are here today to address the rise of global anti-Semitism. 10 years ago, Nathan Sharansky explained, classical and anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish people or the Jewish religion. New anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish state. Mr. Sharansky devised what he called the 3D test. The 3Ds are demonization, double standards, and delegitimization. Demonization is making bizarre, ugly claims that have no basis in reality. Comparisons between Israel and the Nazis, or assertions that Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinians, are examples of demonization. Such claims are nonsense. If Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinians, then why has the population of Palestinians increased more than 600% since 1948? Israel must be the most incompetent mass murderer in the history of the world. When Israel is held to a standard that no other country in the world would be expected to meet, that double standard is itself anti-Semitism. For instance, Israel is a vibrant democracy where human rights are protected and respected, and yet the United Nations so-called Human Rights Commission spends most of its time and effort investigating and condemning Israel, while they gloss over or ignore the massive and continuing human rights violations that occur in Iran, Cuba, China, and many other brutal, repressive atrocities. Delegitimization of Israel is to assert that of all the people in the world, only the Jewish people do not have a right to a statehood. In fact, Israel's historical, legal, and moral right to exist as a Jewish state is a codified principle of international law. This codification is explicitly based on the long, continuous, and well-documented connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. To deny the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is anti-Semitism in its purest form. But why should anti-Semitism matter to the rest of the world? Why should the world care? It should, not merely because it's morally repugnant, which it most definitely is. The world should care about anti-Semitism because of fundamental self-preservation. The stark truth is that the world stands at the edge of a deep, dark precipice. At the bottom lurks another Holocaust that has already begun. This time, the genocide is not only against the Jews. The so-called Islamic State has made it abundantly clear that it can be committed against non-Jews. ISIS persecuting and killing members of every religious, ethnic, and nationalistic community they encounter. ISIS is slaughtering Syrians, Iraqis, Lebanese, Palestinians. ISIS is slaughtering Christians, Sunnis, Shiites, Alawites, Kurds, Druze, and Yazidis. ISIS floods the internet with stomach-churning images and videos of mass executions, severed heads, and crucifixions. We see children slaughtered in front of their parents, and parents slaughtered in front of their children. This viciousness is a part of a calculated strategy explicitly intended to terrorize anyone and everyone who does not submit to their version of Islam. ISIS has officially declared its intent to rule the world. Their founding document, the declaration of their caliphate, bears the modest title, هَذَا وَعْدُ اللَّهِ. It means in Arabic, this is the promise of God. They declare that God promised to Muslims, quote, leadership of the world and mastership of the earth, end quote. Their declaration of a worldwide caliphate reveals their governing philosophy. Quote, by Allah, if you disbelieve in democracy, secularism, nationalism, as well as all the other garbage and ideas from the West, and rush to your religion and creed, then by Allah, you will own the earth, and the East and the West will submit to you. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, savagery is not merely their strategy. It is an article of their faith. They commit genocide in the name of Allah. Israel has been familiar with the concept and the reality of genocide in the name of Allah for a long time. The war that ISIS has declared on the world is the same war as the war that Hamas has been waging against Israel for decades.
Yes.
The only difference, again, is focus. ISIS seeks a worldwide caliphate. Hamas is focused on the destruction of Israel. However, their motivations, methods, and morals are the same. In terms of brutal methods and lack of morals, ISIS has recently shot, hacked, and killed its way to the top of the world's terrorist organizations. Meanwhile, Hamas has been committing mind-numbing mass atrocities for decades. They used to wrap their children in dynamite and nails and send them to blow up Israeli buses and restaurants. They rejoiced at the death of Israeli children and glorified the death of their own. Today, they use them as a human shield. I know something about children being used as human shields. In 1976, when I was 11 years old, Palestinians in South Lebanon used me and my family as human shields. They employed exactly the same technique that Hamas uses in Gaza today. They set up artillery or rocket launchers in front of my bomb shelter and fired a barrage towards Israel. They would pack up and run as quickly as possible, leaving my family to the devastation of return fire. Today, Hamas hides behind human shields on a much larger scale. Hamas routinely uses schools, mosques, hospitals, and other civilian locations for weapons storage, missile launch sites, and other military purposes. They fire rockets and mortars from these places with the explicit intention of drawing return fire from the Israelis, hoping that they will produce photogenic civilian corpses for display in the media. Hamas and ISIS share a common motivation. They want to impose Islam. This is the charter of Hamas, as it is in ISIS's declaration of the caliphate. the Charter of Hamas declares that, quote, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, end quote. The most revealing words in the Hamas Charter are a quotation from Islamic scripture. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews. The stones and trees will say, "Oh Muslim, oh Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." This is from Hadith of Sahih Muslim, book 41. But Hamas has a problem. In Israel, Jews don't hide behind stones or trees. In Israel, Jews stand up and defend themselves. Israelis have learned. Israelis have learned from history that if someone repeatedly says they're going to kill you, they mean it. A lesson the world is only now learning. Years ago, the world stood by as the Jews of Europe went out the chimneys. Today, the Jews of Israel aren't going to go quietly into the slaughter as they sit on the front line of fighting for Western civilization, fighting for all of us. Those who seek to exterminate the Jews are not going to stop with the Jews. That should have been the lesson of the Holocaust. That must be the lesson of the rise of ISIS. Once the international mass murder of innocent civilians was legitimized against Israel, it was legitimized everywhere, constrained by nothing more than the strong-held beliefs of those who would become the mass murderers. Because the Palestinians were encouraged by most of the world to believe that the murder of innocent Israeli civilians is a legitimate tactic to advance their Palestinian cause. The Islamists believe that they may commit mass murder anywhere in the world to advance their holy cause. As a result, we suffer from a plague of terrorism, Islamic terrorism, from Moscow to Madrid, from Bali to Beslan, from Nairobi to New York, authored and perfected by the Palestinians. Israel and the United States are not separate targets of Islamic terrorism. The whole world is their target, and the world better learn this lesson and understand. Evil dwells when courageous men become bystanders. Lies spread when the informed become silent. Society deteriorates when apathy replaces activism. Tyranny comes when leaders become mediocre and haters become organized. Today, we are summoned to lead in our communities and our nations. We are summoned to wake up the apathetic and inspire the despair, to silence the liars and educate the concerned, to speak tolerance instead of resentment, forgiveness instead of revenge, love instead of hate, peace instead of war. We are here at the United Nations today because each one of us is a leader and an instrument of change with history as our final judge. How will we be judged? I, as a leader of ActForAmerica.org, the largest national security organization in America, with chapters in 11 countries around the world, am committed to do whatever possible we can to stand up with the Jewish people and defend them. The civilized world must band together in solidarity to ensure that people of all faiths can live in peace and harmony, and that Jews are never persecuted and victimized by barbaric, murderous ideologies ever again. That Jews can walk in any street in the world with their head held high and say that Israel, the Jewish state, the only democracy in the Middle East, continues to shine as a beacon of light in the darkest regions of the world. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. Now just make Shaver, the UN correspondent and also security analyst, Marcus Mosioli.
Thank you, Gordon. First of all, I have to say, it's kind of hard to
follow. Not hard enough to follow.
to do better than those two guys. But I'm going to try. First of all, I want to thank everyone here. Thank everyone who came, and I want to thank His Excellency, Dr. Otto. All I can say is thank you on behalf of the Jewish people, thank you on behalf of Israel, and thank you on behalf of someone who, all I can say is you are a special person and your country is a special country. What I want to do is I want to give, I believe, some lines of contact between what His Excellency Ron Kasor said and what Brigitte Gabriel just said. And what I want to do is really enable everyone here to be able to go to his next door neighbor and in a calm, clear way explain how Israel's fight today will be the world's fight tomorrow. And I put together a PowerPoint as well as a couple of pamphlets, so everybody don't have to worry. Almost all the graphics that are up there are in these pamphlets, so don't worry about it. Okay. First of all, I'd like to give a little news context to my talk. In that last week, Defense Minister Yaakov said a West Bank withdrawal will lead to rocket and mortar fire on Ben Gurion Airport. He also said that Israel should look for a diplomatic process outside the box, and he mentioned newfound strategic interests shared with moderate states. Now, I just want to make a qualifying statement in that I'm not representing the Israeli government, and I'm not presuming to say exactly that this is what he meant in my talk. But the facts and the maps that I'm about to show you, I believe will give you a qualitative matrix to be able to understand better what is being talked about in the news. Now, the short one is Israel today, the world tomorrow. Now that's a pretty dramatic statement, right? Well, in 1938, you had anti-Semitism. And I think it would have been a little bit difficult to go from 1938 anti-Semitism to 1939 and 1940 Nazi blitzkrieg. However, today, as my two predecessors explained, anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. And what I hope to show you in the next little time is what I believe is a straight and direct line from 2014 anti-Zionism to an Islamist sweep south and east into the moderate Sunni oil states, as well as an Islamic sweep westward into Europe. And how am I going to show that? I'm going to show that through maps. But I would be remiss if I did not explain the picture on the left. And the picture on the left was a 15-year-old boy by the name of Daniel Bislick. He was going to school near the Gaza Strip. And a terrorist, very similar to the one you can see in that little picture of the rocket, fired an anti-tank rocket into his yellow school bus and killed him. So just wanted to sort of dedicate this talk to Daniel Bislick. Now, how am I going to go from Israel today to the world tomorrow? Well, I'm going to sort of go back in history to 1581. And the first map up a map done by Heinrich Bunting. And what he showed in this map, in almost 100 years after Columbus discovered America, was he saw the world as Asia, Europe, and Africa. The new America had just been barely discovered. And he believed that Jerusalem, the Levant, was in fact the crossroads of all of these continents, and it was sort of the node through which you got from Asia to Europe, and Europe to Africa, as well as Asia to Africa. And so what I believe is this map, in many ways, sums up the strategic importance of Israel, in that it is the gateway, it is the controlling node through which, if God forbid ISIS were able to break, it would go everywhere. Now that might seem like a very dramatic statement, but let's go to my first map that I've made. And in this map, and by the way, everyone's got to forgive me, I had an Apple failure, and then I had a pointer, but it's not working, so please forgive me. So in this map, in the bottom right-hand portion of this map, you have about 370 million Muslims. Now this number excludes Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Malaysia. Big number, just on this map. Now in the upper left-hand corner, you have Greece, that has 11 million Christians, which means you have 370 million Muslims on the bottom right, and 11 million Greeks that the United States is sworn to defend under the NATO treaty in the upper corner. And the only non-Muslim country, principal non-Muslim country between those two forces is Israel. Now, to give you an even finer point to it, we have what is really the Achilles heel of Europe, which is Cyprus, which has 1 million Christians. And I just have a map here of sort of a before and after. If God forbid something had happened to Israel, the Achilles heel of Europe would be sitting right over there. Now, everyone should be learning the UN, and we should be fair, and everyone should be asking me a question. How are you conglomerating all of these Muslims into one number that is a militant number against Europe? And my answer is, I'm not doing it. Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey, another country and supposedly a moderate Muslim, is doing it. For on September 13th, 2011, he said to a thronging Egyptian crowd, a Turkish Muslim alliance would form a force 150 million people strong, and we are substantially surrounding the Mediterranean. Now, if a moderate, quote-unquote, like Prime Minister of Turkey, is saying this publicly, can you imagine what is in the mind of ISIS and all of the other extremists that are rampant through the Middle East? Now, he also said on July 19th, Israel surpassed, the same Prime Minister of Turkey, who's now, I believe, President of Turkey. He said, Israel surpasses Hitler in barbarism. Now, my belief is that these two statements are really two sides of the same coin. Now let's get to how does this relate to Israel. Okay. This room was a little bit too big for me to show my topographic map of Israel, but I put it up on the screen. And one of my favorite of all favorite events was about 21 years ago. I walked into the New York Times editorial board to give them a briefing on my map. And there were the editors that write on Israel in the room. And one of the editors points to the actual side of the Jordan River, which is the West Bank, the the Jordan River. And he says, mocking me and laughing at me, he says, you're never going to be able to prove that that's strategic. And I said, you know, you're right. I'm not going to be able to prove that's spot right, the West Bank, which is the West Bank of the Jordan River, is strategic. But that's not the West Bank we know and love to fight about. The actual West Bank, if you're looking up on the screen, is really the entire area up to the Green Line. So between the red line, which is the Jordan River, and the Green Line is a mountain range that's called the Mountains of Samaria. The Green Line is where, in 1948-49, there was an armistice, and it was where Israel started out in the 67 war. And Israel captured all of these mountains. Okay? So what they're talking about when they talk about the West Bank is not a little bank on the side of the river. It's this entire mountain range. And it's not only a little mountain range. It's actually a mountain range where if you look at that blue patch, and by the way, from the right side of the blue patch to the left side of the blue patch is about 10 miles. And north and south runs about 40 miles. So in that rectangle is about 70% of Israel's population and 80% of her industrial base. Now, why is that so critical? Well, first of all, you can see that you've got a mountain range right sitting on top of Israel's population center. But this is really why it's absolutely the heart of the issue. Right now, Israel has been receiving fire from the Gaza Strip. And basically, I'm going to show you two circles. Up to recently, this was the width of the missiles that were fired into Israel. These missiles, let's just say, for simplicity's sake, they went roughly 20 kilometers or 12 miles. It carried about 35 pounds of high explosive. Okay? Now, the missiles are this wide. This is 302 millimeters. This was 122, and this is 302. These are the new things they're firing. Okay? But this is the point. People will say, as Hannah Shroud did, almost, I think, a week ago, she said, oh, they're homemade rockets. They don't cause any damage. Okay? Now, what's been going on is they've been firing these rockets, and if you look at it from the Gaza Strip, you will realize almost all the area around the Gaza Strip is relatively sparsely populated. It's mostly farmland. Okay? So if you fire a rocket from North Dakota into one of these rockets from North Dakota into North Dakota, no offense on North Dakota, if anyone's here from North Dakota, or anyone watching, you're not likely to hit something. So they fired, since 2000, maybe 20,000 rockets, like this. But this is the key. If they get, and are given, the West Bank, and fire the same 122s that are easily smuggleable and easily carryable, as I'm about to show you, it's not going to be like firing a mortar or a rocket from North Korea. It's going to be like firing a rocket from Brooklyn to Manhattan. That's why the concentration issue is so great, and why it really makes all the difference. And sorry, what happened was I'm reading the paper this morning, and I see Yuval Steinitz, who's the intelligence minister, and he says the following: if this repeats itself in Judea and Samaria, this becomes an existential threat. From there, thousands of short-range rockets with 20-kilometer ranges put Tel Aviv Gush Dan and Jerusalem into range. And he says, what constitutes the severe threat in Gaza becomes an existential threat from Judea and Samaria. That was in today's Jerusalem Post. So just to give everybody a baseball card view of these rockets, I've put a graphic over here, and you can see what used to be the older rocket, and now what's the new rocket. And I would again be remiss if I did not explain that Iran entitled these new rockets the Khyber rocket. Exactly because, as Gorgi spoke about, they're referring to the Battle of Khyber, which occurred in 1629 on the Arabian Peninsula, where Prophet Muhammad killed... 629. 629. What did I say? 16. Oh, I'm sorry. 629. And as well as enslaved many people. Now, here's a map that what shows, and this is the key part, the new rockets put the rectangle into absolute range from the Gaza Strip. Now, one should understand exactly the depth of what we're dealing with. And one says, you're going to get rid of Hamas. Well, there was a poll that was published just about a week and a half ago. And it was a Palestinian poll, not an Israeli poll, by a Palestinian pollster. And this pollster determined that about 1,200 adults in Gaza, that 88.9% of them support the firing of rockets from Gaza and Israel. Now that is a scary situation. And one, again, I have a graphic of what exactly this rocket looks like compared to a man. And one of the key differences between the Katyusha and this rocket is it can carry, just as a point, remember the Katyusha carries around 30 pounds of explosive or warhead. This rocket carries 330 pounds of warhead and rocket. And this is what they were firing into Israel. And one of the possible variants of warhead is a fuel-air explosive. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of it, except to say it is called a poor man's nuclear bomb for good reason. Now, how do these rockets get there? Well, unfortunately, Israel is not just fighting Hamas. Israel is fighting Iran, Qatar, Turkey, and Hamas, and unfortunately a great many of Hamas' supporters throughout the Middle East. And you could see where these rockets actually came, because on March 5th of this year, Israel intercepted the Class C ship, which had 40 of these rockets. Now that could have very well have been the tipping point. If those 40 rockets had gotten into Gaza, maybe one of those rockets could have gone through and caused absolute carnage in Israel. And when we're talking about blockades and any type of interdiction, Israel isn't trying to stop humanitarian and normal foodstuffs and other commerce from going into Gaza. They're trying to stop the 302s. That's why we have a problem. And again, just to give a comparison, one can see the Katyusha on the left. And why is this so problematic? It's problematic because, again, if there were some type of Palestinian state, you would have to stop this small of a rocket from being used by determined terrorists. That is what Israel is up against in its peace process. And just to really explain the unfortunate weeds of this problem, these rockets don't just contain high explosive. They contain ball bearings. And what do barbarians do? They don't kill people. They maim them, like this Jewish boy down on the left. And as a fact, Katyushas as well carry chemical weapons. Now, I talked about Israel's strategic value to Western Europe. I talked about the threat to Israel from a West Bank Palestinian state. I'm now going to circle back to Defense Minister Ya'alon's quote to give a little bit of background to how Israel is not only protecting Western civilization, Israel is protecting moderate Muslims. Now, how? Well, first of all, in your materials, I had how I've derived this black hole triangle. But essentially, the short and simple is underneath this triangle is 56% of the world's oil supply. And you don't need to be a genius to understand that this is what everyone is fighting about. This is what the Sunnis and the Shias and ISIS is all fighting. This is where the gold is. And so the real issue is, how is Israel protecting moderate Sunnis? Well, and by the way, moderate Druze, moderate Shia, really everybody who's interested in freedom in what I call Eastern theater. So, I have a map, and I developed this 21 years ago. I was in a congressional office, and a congressman essentially said to me, "Can you explain to me why Israel is not the cause of instability?" Because perhaps the biggest lie, it's the big lie, is that Israel is the cause of instability in the Middle East. That Israel is the cause of all of the problems. And when people say this, they are not just talking about Israel post-1967. Make no mistake. People who say Israel is the cause of instability of the Middle East are talking about Israel from 1948, Israel from 1925, Israel from whenever. So this has nothing to do with Green Line or not Green Line. So I tried to explain to him, where Israel was on the map, and I could see he really didn't understand the map very well. So on the way home, I made a simple map. And I said, well, okay, God forbid something happens to Israel, let's game it out. And I said, the first thing is Lebanon and independent Lebanon. Hasn't been. Will never be. God forbid something happens to Israel. What's going to happen? You're going to get a little bit of a bigger Syria, Hezbollah, Iran to the north, and a little bit of a bigger Egypt to the south. That's it. Next, Israel has been protecting Jordan for 50 years from Assad and now from ISIS. Could anyone imagine if Jordan had to worry about ISIS not only from the east, but from a Western Palestinian state that turns into a Hamas Palestinian state? So the second map shows Jordan goes down, and then all of a sudden, you see what the real problem is. If those two things happen, then what have you got? You've got Saudi Arabia under threat from God only knows how many ways. So in effect, what this maps show is Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and any moderate Muslim in this arc actually has a vested interest in keeping Israel safe and secure. So now, in conclusion, anti-Zionism of today will lead to terrible, terrible catastrophe for the world tomorrow, both in the Islamic world as well as the European world. And I would be remiss if I didn't go back to the map.